You're listening to Francis Oblivion and the Mad Undead by J. Johnson Higgins. This audiobook edition is a Kiss the Widow production.
Introduction. There are good people in pain who are motivated to do questionable things, and then there are the demons who prey on both types of people. As the founder of the Siena Paranormal and Demonic Research Society, or SPIDERS, I have read, documented, and heard about many strange things involving these three. Our organization is a non-profit corporation dedicated to providing resources and assisting the public regarding supernatural activity in our world. My team of professionals have investigated and preserved resources on paranormal activities for over 15 years. Many experiences we've investigated have been those associated with places, particularly buildings, fields, cemeteries, houses, ships, etc. On very rare occasions, there are the experiences that follow individuals wherever they go, those that are not tied to any location and cannot be escaped without a forceful intervention. If the entity is hostile and intends to harm the subject physically and/or mentally, as well as those around them, this is the most threatening type of experience to have to endure, and it is largely the subject of this story. I was approached by a woman about the accounts you will find in Francis Oblivion and the Mad Undead via an email that I'd almost deleted, but decided to entertain. We'd later met to discuss the accounts further at a little restaurant called the Scott Ellis Tavern in the Danton neighborhood of Siena. I was late for our meeting on that cold, wet February evening, but she waited for me at a small, rustic, white table at the rear as she sipped on a dark vanilla porter. I could feel her presence almost immediately. I felt my eyes pulling directly toward her like a beacon. She was beneath the portrait of Scott Germain Ellis, the Gothic author for which the bar was named and themed. He'd lived in this city over a century ago, wrote some of his works here, though not his best known, and ultimately died under the most mysterious of circumstances after being found not far from this very location in an adjacent neighborhood, Hell's Point. His timeless, haunting eyes looked through the years and seemed to endorse my decision to meet the young lady on the far side of the room. Apparently, she had a strange story of her own to tell, though part of me wondered if she was just another of those strange S.G. Ellis fangirls who can't get enough of the macabre and would get a kick out of pitching her own dark concoctions my way. I'm almost always wary of offers that find me first. As the woman swallowed her drink, her throat moved against the spiked collar around her neck, and her dark burgundy lipstick kissed off subtly on the frosty glass. Confirming I had spotted her, she stood and waved at me as I approached like an excited student who knew an answer to a question, a big bright smile. I then learned that she'd ordered for me the same drink that she enjoyed before I'd shown up, and it made it to the table within seconds of my arrival, perfectly timed. How she knew that I would want to try this brew and that I'd arrive at that moment was unclear to me, but she did seem to know, and she was right. She gave me a smirk.
"For you,"
she said.
"I'm so glad you came, Miss DeWall."
Then she said something unexpected but rather direct.
"Before we get started, I just want to say that you should call your daughter. I think the two of you will want to talk first. It's just a feeling, but I think you should take just a moment to do that. I can wait for you. Does that make sense?"
It did, and I'll explain. Without going into detail about it, the woman somehow knew that my daughter and I had fought earlier that day and that we did not part ways on good terms. We'd both said some things that we didn't really mean this afternoon, and I'd been worrying about her all evening. For the woman's accuracy, I decided to do as she asked. I stepped away to call my daughter briefly before she and I got started. Looking back, I'm glad that I did, and I'm glad that the woman made the strange recommendation. My daughter and I didn't talk for long, 2 minutes at most. But the call had a profound impact on the remainder of my day in a positive way.
"All good?"
she asked. "Yes," I replied. I was already feeling better, and I nodded as I returned to the table. I thanked her. These simple actions provide a small taste of the kind of person you will come to know by the time you finish reading through the accounts. Somehow, it's like she already knew me but passed off the clairvoyance as nothing. She is a person with special gifts that she shares matter-of-factly. We carried on briefly talking about mundane things at first, but soon after, she'd gone ahead and explained her situation in greater detail than the messages to me could capture. And then she asked me to help her with publicizing her and her partner's accounts. It is important to maintain the credibility of the work that we endorse at the Society, and honestly, I wasn't sure of what we were getting into with this story when she first reached out. I was initially curious but also reluctant to become involved in her project. However, after I'd read over some of the accounts for myself and listened to and viewed what she'd presented to me, I was thoroughly convinced that I should go ahead and meet her and ultimately assist her with compiling and editing the work. The objective was to assemble a single slim volume from a collection of journals, documents, and recordings that could be easily understood by a layperson unacquainted with supernatural forces or the occult. Once completed, I would also assist with its distribution to a wider public. The woman who approached me had apparently considered many avenues for publicizing her accounts, but because of the peculiar content and subject matter, the material was dismissed by most nonfiction publishers in its original form, and she didn't even bother trying to run it by her academic peers. This did not surprise me in the least, as I'd seen this type of response before. She felt that her accounts needed to be in a durable format, as well as multiple electronic formats that are easy to access. She was afraid that the experiences would be forgotten in the long run. And so she turned to me, someone who specializes in the supernatural, and in assuring that these experiences take on a widely available, deliverable form that is effective and lasting. I offered her my recommendation. I suggested that she or I, or her companion named in the accounts, find a fiction author, and a lesser-known or independent one at that, to have the work published under their name as fiction to minimize the vetting of her most important content and avoid any adverse impact on her budding professional reputation as an educator. If she wishes to reveal herself later, of course she may. Despite what it may have sounded like, this was not an insult to her, her experiences, or to the fiction author's capabilities. This was an opportunity to marry several positive forces. I made the analogy of the fiction author's involvement to that of Ouija boards or other spirit boards, and tarot cards being classified as games, and playing cards, to assure their wide availability and evasion of formal resistance from a content and distribution perspective. These things claim nothing but personal enjoyment, yet they tell all for those who are looking. This would be true of her story as well, if the book is simply altered and classified as a work of fiction or entertainment. People tend to feel safer and more willing to explore this kind of material when it is labeled fiction based on events, rather than a pure documentary or memoir, and they tend to really enjoy it too. We just needed an author willing to take on the abnormal risks. I just happened to know of someone with the right mix of artistic, professional, and academic backgrounds to appreciate the woman's unique situation and strike this balance unapologetically. I offered that name, and you are now reading their work. The woman who approached me accepted the idea rather soon after, but the process that followed was far from brief. The arranging, altering of names, events, and the general preparation of this manuscript has not been a simple task, but the individuals involved were cooperative and agreeable throughout the process. The accounts are indeed strange ones that the average person would find difficult to believe. We all knew this. Despite this, there are many subtle details that absolutely had to make it into the final copy for this project to be worth the effort. Those details remain today. In this finalized version, the names of people, places, landmarks, and other proper names have been drastically changed, sometimes comically so, to protect or mask the individuals involved. This is why I have not disclosed the actual name of the woman who approached me, and why her actual name will not appear in the story to follow. It is the reason why my name and the name of my organization were both altered in this introduction. The only person in this process who insisted on leaving their name unchanged was the fiction author, saying that it's already my pen name, and if this is to be published as fiction, no change is necessary. We had taken major liberties with this story, which is why this work may now be considered a work of fiction. You will notice some of those liberties immediately, or perhaps you already have, particularly if you personally know the author. However, the actual events that fueled this novel occurred in and around a city that will not be revealed here, but as you will see, that setting and the world was deliberately transformed and replaced with a fictitious and amorphous analogy which we decided to call Siena, a jurisdiction within a state that is not named in the manuscript. That state is situated within a country simply referred to as the mainland. This transformation allowed for unlimited liberties and identity protections when the story called for it. The result is a story that conceals the endogenous details of those involved, yet reveals the exogenous paranormal truths we wish to discuss and shine light on without restraint. With this said, everyone involved was tasked with keeping the underlying essence of the situations, thoughts, and emotions intact while knowing that it would be published as fiction. This is a bigger and more challenging responsibility than it appears to be, much like arranging an enjoyable comedic opera out of someone's actual, full, and trying life. There are points that move the plot in a linear fashion and others that capture the feeling of an entire situation like an aria. In the end, we knew we would be at the mercy and trust of the third-party fiction author, to emphasize the events for the right reasons when given the opportunity to, and to de-emphasize them when it does not serve the story or bring the overall important experiences and subtleties to light. The irony here is that the true story behind it all is so bizarre anyway that you would be surprised at how much of the final material was not embellished and survived fundamentally unchanged, according to the original accounts. Most of the vivid artistic license, I've found, has been to accent points in an exaggerated fashion and raise tension using metaphors and symbols, using composite characters to remain compliant with requested confidentiality, and to keep the release of information orderly and clear for the reader. I commend our author for this and for respecting the wishes of the stakeholders. These accounts are largely the personal thoughts of individuals that were never intended to be read or shared with others in the manner that you are about to receive them. These accounts also include some supplemental materials that corroborate or illuminate incidents that could not be captured or delivered in journal entries and messages alone. While mostly left intact, please be aware that these accounts have been edited for clarity and for the purposes of presenting them to an interested audience that reads fiction. Therefore, the entries herein are an excerpt, chronologically rearranged when necessary, sewn together and sometimes rephrased in order to accurately reflect or bring current the sometimes intricate, inaccurate, or even partially stated details so not to inadvertently confuse or misdirect the reader. These collected accounts include a combination of public records and private sources that required consent to obtain in their raw form. I'd like to take this moment to thank the families, friends, public and private sources for providing consent. We could not have completed this without you. I personally thank the reader for taking the time to read this book, and I hope that it serves as the resource on the subject that it was intended to be. At the very least, I hope that you enjoy it as entertainment. Claire DeWall.
This story is 100% original and written by a human, yours truly, the author. AI was not used to write, prompt, organize, or otherwise generate this story. This audiobook edition was, however, created using licensed text-to-voice software with a lifelike casting and intonation manually adjusted and refined line by line by me, and art in and of itself. The theme music was written and produced by Kiss the Widow. If you like what you found so far, please like and follow, subscribe, and share. Also, please be sure to check out my socials.